Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome. My name is Jeremy Smith. Thanks for coming out to PowerShell Saturday. Don't forget to take a look, stop by the sponsor booths. We're really appreciative of them helping to help put this event on for so many people. Okay, so I'm going to talk about default formats and when and how you might want to customize them. Some pros and cons about using them, and so this is kind of a 101 in that sense, that it is sort of foundational to what PowerShell is doing for you, and hopefully this lets you understand a little bit more about what's going on. But it's not a 101 in terms of like here's all the syntax and stuff. You'll hopefully get a sense of that from the examples. If you have any questions, try to hold them till the end if you can. Write them down or something. I think I'll have enough time for questions at the end, but just in case, I want to make sure I get through all of my content. So we're just going to level set a little bit real quick at the beginning. I'm going to go over some basics of objects, just so we're all talking about the same thing in terms of formatting. And then I'm going to go over basics of the PowerShell object pipeline. And then we'll talk about default formatting and what role it plays. And then we'll get into the meat of it, of different ways you might want to customize that output. So let's get right into it. With types and objects, it sounds very developer-y, and a lot of PowerShell users are not developers, so don't be afraid of types and objects. We'll try to keep it pretty simple, just enough knowledge to really help you be more productive. So you can think of a type as kind of a template that describes what to expect out of an object, and I'll get into that in just a minute. It's a mapping between a name and just a set of members. So what are members? There are a whole bunch of member types that PowerShell defines. For formatting, I really just care about the property ones. So these are just kind of attributes about a thing. Now an object is an instance of a type. So kind of like I've got an example in a little bit about like a cookie cutter. Think about type kind of like a cookie cutter, and the objects are the cookies that have the same shape as the cookie cutter, and you can make multiple cookies out of that. So for anyone who's messed with Active Directory, there's a really good module for PowerShell for Active Directory. So here's an example where I'm just getting a user, and here's the object that comes back. And there's a whole bunch of properties on this object. The given name, the SID, the account name, all of that. If I take this command, the get AD user, and pipe it to get member, that's one of the core functions that you should learn to love if you're brand new to PowerShell, is get member. It helps you see into an object's definition and what the makeup of it is. You'll see that we have this type name. That's really important for this formatting stuff. And then all of the members and their definitions. And so there's all the type names of the properties on there. And that's what all that sort of noise is in there. Is you've got the name of the property, the member type. I'm just filtering on properties right now, and then the type of the members, and then the actual name again that it's referencing. Okay, so kind of went over this before, but think of it kind of like the cookie cutter example. All the cookies that come out of a cookie cutter are expected to look the same, but they don't always look the same, right? If you're making a little gingerbread man, the arm breaks off, it came out of the same cookie cutter, but it was changed a little bit after it was made. You might also add frosting or sprinkles or something, and add some stuff to it after it was made. But when you look at just the cookie cutter, you should be able to expect a rough idea of what you're getting out of that. So that's kind of the mental model to go with here. So here's our AD user example again, looking at all the properties. This is the same slide we just saw. Now if I change this command, get AD user, and I pull back all the properties, now you see the list of members has grown, but the type name is the same. And so that's the example of the type name telling PowerShell, here's what to expect, but it won't always be that way. And so again, that's a benefit of looking at using getMember to actually inspect your objects, to actually see what is really there, not just what do I expect. Okay, so that's a, fire hydrant blast of objects. Now let's do a quick review on the pipeline. Basically, the PowerShell pipeline is just responsible for passing objects from one function to another. We do that with the pipe operator. So you see I've got 3 functions being called up at the top there. I'm going to get all of the files in the directory. I'm going to pipe that over to where object and filter for any files that name matches the word format. And then I'm going to sort all of those. And so those are function 1, pipe to function 2, pipe to function 3. That's basically the object pipeline. And down below that is just the result, an example result. So let's dive into this pipeline that's sort of underlying this whole command structure. So get child item, whose alias is dir. So if you're used to using Windows command prompt or ls in the Unix world, get child item is just the official PowerShell function name for that. It's emitting objects, file objects, onto the pipeline. As that's what it's responsible for doing. It's just, when you call it, it's just throwing out objects, whatever the results are, onto that pipeline. The pipeline then is sending those objects in as input into the next function. And so then the where object receives those objects that are coming over, and then it uses for each object, it's saying, hey, look at the name property. If it matches format, then send it on its way. And if it doesn't match format, then just discard it. And so there could be less objects coming out of the where object function than went into it. So the pipeline then sends those objects into the sort object function. That is responsible for reordering the results. But then the question is, what happens at the end of that? I only typed out those 3 commands. There's some like magic going on between that point and what you see on your screen, and that's where default formatting comes into play, is that in between what you see on the screen and what you've typed there. So I'll contrast this with explicit formatting. So here's the exact same command, but now I've piped it to one of the formatting functions. I piped it to format table or format list or format wide, any of those. You're telling the engine, here's exactly how I want it formatted. Don't do anything automatically for me. Versus if you don't specify a format, that's where the default formatting comes in. Okay. Here's a slightly different variation where I've got this pipeline. It's the exact same one, but I'm setting it into a variable called result. Okay. So in this case, the pipeline kind of starts at get child item. It runs all the way through, and then it shoves all those results into the variable. But there's no formatting that happens. So there's it's still just the variable is just the raw objects. When you view the variable, it's like a mini pipeline, and then you get the default formatting. Or you could pipe the variable into format table or format list or any of those functions. Okay. So now let's get into some of the default formatting options or things that control default formatting. So you've got this thing called format data, which is defined in XML files. And I know early on I talked about pros and cons, and right now I know most people are thinking, oh, that's a con. I don't like XML, right? And I would agree. But there may be times when it's worthwhile to dig in there, so we'll get into that. But there's also a thing called default display property sets that you could use. If there's no format data defined, then the system is looking for display property sets that are set for that type. And then if there's no property set defined, then it'll automatically format it as a table or a list depending on the number of properties. If there's 0 to 4 properties on the object, it'll format it as a table. And if there's more than 4 objects on the object, it'll format it as a list. Okay, I want to dive into each one of these a little bit more in depth, but I want to do it in reverse order. Okay, so we're going to go through the table versus list first, and then the property set, and then last we'll do the format data. So here I've just created a custom object with 4 properties. The PS custom object is just a quick way to create your own object. I forget when it was introduced into the system, but it's a nice concise way of just creating your own arbitrary object. So I've got prop 1, you could call it anything you want, and then a value. And so I've got those 4 different properties. And you see the output is in table form, and that's because there's no format data or display property set defined for this, and there's 4 or less properties. If I add a 5th property, the output is in list form, and that's because the object now has 5 properties on it. Okay, so that's table versus list. It's pretty straightforward. Next, let's look into what we can get out of a default display property set. If we go back to our AD user, Miss Linguini, you can see this object that I've got back maybe doesn't have all the information that I want. Maybe, I don't know if I'm not actually a service desk member, but if I was servicing people who had got their accounts locked out, or maybe their password needs to be changed or something, like if I'm looking up users all the time and those are the properties that I need to see, it would be great if that was just here by default and not, I didn't have to go searching for that. So the first thing I'll do is I'll pipe that object to getMember to see a list of all the properties that are available and to get the type name. Okay, so I need to know the type name and then whichever properties I want. So I go and pick those out, and then I take that type name. In this example, I've set it into a variable just so I can kind of keep everything kind of concise here, but you don't have to do it that way. And then I'm setting this default display property set on the update type data function, and I'm listing out those properties that I want to be there by default. So you could do whatever you want. Here, I'm more interested in password kind of stuff. So we've mapped this type name to an expected set of properties that should be displayed. Okay, I'm gonna go one level deeper here real quick, so bear with me. I run the function, and everything's blank because I've told PowerShell to expect these properties, but those properties aren't being returned by the function. Okay, so the object that was created doesn't have what I told PowerShell to expect, but when I run with calling AD user with all the properties, now it fills in because now the properties are there on the object, and so the formatter can fill those values into what I've told it to expect. You could, if you didn't want to have to, like if you wanted to use this sort of example and you didn't want to have to define dash property star every time, or your explicit list of properties, you could set a global default for the function. So here, you can say for any time I call it get AD user, I want the default value for properties to be star, and then every time you call it, it'll just be there. So that's I don't know, a little tip if you want to use that. So let me change it and switch it up a little bit, and maybe I only need 4 properties. Like maybe by default I want this to be kind of in a tabular form. I'm pulling back a lot of users. Maybe my function is actually running some filter instead of instead of searching for a specific username. So if I redefine this to just include the SAM account name, enabled name, and distinguished name, now when I run the function, it's in tabular form and I only have those 4 properties. So this is just an example, and hopefully gets your the wheels turning about how it might be useful for you in your own environment, because it's definitely going to be different for everybody based on your job function, based on how often you use this. Like if you only use the Active Directory commandlets once in a blue moon, it's not worth your time to set up default formats, right? Just dive in the moment to figure that out. But if this is something you're doing daily, it might be more and more worthwhile for you to look into this kind of stuff. Okay, so lastly, we'll look at the format data. And here, the example is looking at SSL certificates, specifically the root certificate authority. So I'm saying go find all the root authorities and filter them where the expiration date, the not after property, where it's before today. So find all the root authorities that have already expired. Okay. And so thanks to backwards compatibility on Windows part, there's several on every default system. And the thing that is missing that I feel like is most important for what I'm trying to do here is the date that it actually expired. So the default format that's showing up here only has the thumbprint and the subject, but it doesn't tell me what the expiration date is. Okay, so I want to go add that in there. So I'll take my certificate objects and I'll pipe them into getMember. And now I'm going to grab the type name here. It's nice and long. All of the .NET type names have like periods in between different levels of the hierarchy. So it's kind of a pattern that might help you recognize when you're looking at a type name. And then I'm going to go pick out all of the properties that I want in my default view. So I'm going to pick the friendly name, the not after, the expiration date, and then the thumbprint. Okay, so I've got my type name here. I call update type data, define my default display property set. This is exactly what we did for the AD user example. I run my function again, and nothing changes. Okay, I just told PowerShell, here's the default display property set I want you to use, and it accepted it, and then it ignored it. Can't say I'm a fan of that, but that's how it works. So the reason is because there already exists format data for certificates and for a lot of objects. Okay, there's a bunch of XML files. They're PS1 XML files that are defined in the PowerShell home directory, and they cover default formatting for a lot of stuff. So there may be a lot of use cases where the default formatting is already what you want, because Microsoft and the PowerShell team have gone in and tried to think ahead on your behalf and figure out what would be most useful. But I found there's always some edge cases where you just need a certain set of properties. So we have to find a way to override what's already being defined for certificates, and that's where we get into writing a little bit of XML. So put on your XML big boy pants. We're gonna kind of step through it. A lot of the information online refers you to look at an existing XML file, the format XML files, take that, copy it, and then trim it down and kind of craft it to what you need. I have found that is easier said than done, because a lot of those files are really complicated. They're doing, this well goes really deep with the capabilities there. So I've tried to break it down and just show you from the beginning, from ground zero, what do you actually need to kind of get the bare minimum formatting. So I want to get this certificate stuff. I want 3 properties, and I want it defined as a table. That's my goal in doing this. So with XML, you always need a start tag and an end tag. I like to always pair those at the same time so I don't forget to add them later. Try to keep the indentation in, and it is case sensitive, which is different than a lot of the way the rest of PowerShell works. But XML, just by nature, is case sensitive, so be careful there. Okay, so we've got our outer elements, and these slides should be available after the talk. So the font just is going to shrink a little bit because I got to fit a lot on the slide. So don't try to write this all down. Okay, we'll have a view section in there. So the configuration and view configurations is kind of standard. It's got to be there one per file, and that's it. You could have multiple views defined in a file. For this example, we just care about one. So things I need, excuse me, I need a name for this view, just any arbitrary unique name. So I'm calling it certificates demo. And then I need to tell PowerShell when to use this view. And so I'm defining that. Anytime you see this type of object, this X509 certificate, then you should use this view. Okay, so those are the key things that you might need to replace if you're creating multiple format files. Those are the things to look at there. I'm going to be creating a table control. So there's a new chunk under there. A lot of ceremony in the XML, when really we just care about kind of the content of the headers and the values in the cells. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in to the table control section there, and we'll talk about what is needed for defining the headers and the columns. Okay, so I've got 3 properties that I want to define. So I've got 3 column header elements, or table column header elements up there, and then 3 separate column items. So I'm going to just highlight those real quick. And they've got to be paired together. So the first table column header element is paired essentially with the first table column item. And that's all it's doing, is saying, hey, use this property as the first column. But there's a lot of fluff that kind of has to be done in order just to say that phrase. And then the second set are paired together, and then the last set. So this is pretty simple. I don't actually have to do anything inside the table column header element, because I'm just looking for a property. All I want to do is format this as a table. Because I'm referencing the property on the object, PowerShell already knows what to call it. Call it the property name. If you wanted to change the name or something like that, then you might have to add more stuff to the column header. But by default, this is kind of the bare minimum that you would need for that. So we'll zoom back out to the whole XML file. It's really not that bad, but it is enough that I had to shrink this down to like 8-point font. And the only things in here that we care about are that name, the type name, and the 3 properties, basically. So that's what all this XML file is really just containing. Okay, so I've got that file created on the file system. Now I need to tell PowerShell to use it. So I call update format data, and I want to prepend the path with that XML file. So anytime you call update format data, it's reloading all of the format data. All of those default files that come built in with PowerShell, it's reloading that. You shouldn't ever change those. And then prepending says, I want to use mine first before you start looking at the ones that come built in. You could also do append path if you wanted yours to come as, last in the chain. Okay. And so now finally, when I call that function, I get the format that I've wanted all along to see this. Now, because I was limited in slide space, like practically, I found it more useful to add in things like the issuer also, and maybe the signature algorithm or the common name. Like if you're really interested in certificate stuff, you could actually make this a little more practical with the actual 1080 monitor. You'll have plenty of room to get all the fields in there. Okay. Let's say I'm still trying to conserve some more space, and I really don't care about the time of day. Like if the certificate is expiring, like if I'm looking at like server certificates or something, and it's expiring that day, it's just got to get updated, right? It doesn't. I should have already been changing it out before the day of expiration, so I don't usually care about the time that it expires. So here I'm going to make an alteration to the not after property. I'm going to use a script block in the format instead of calling the property name. Okay, so now I have to change that column header and give it a name, because the value is now just a script block. It's not a property that already has a name. And so basically I'm just printing that not after date with a specific format. All I want is the year, month, day, and I want it always to be 4-digit year, 2-digit month, and 2-digit day. So that's that 4 Ys, 2 Ms, and 2 Ds format. And then I still use the same name as the normal object has. And now when I run it, I update the format data to reload it. And now I run that through, and I've got nice constant width date, and don't have to worry about the time. So you can kind of squeeze more columns in that way sometimes if you really just have the critical information that you're looking for. Okay, so let's do a little review. The first precedence, or when PowerShell is evaluating the pipeline, and you get to the end, it looks for format data to exist first. You can customize your own with using the update format data that we just went over. I recommend usually prepending the path for that. Then if no format data exists, you can use the default display property set. In order to control that, you use update type data. And then if that doesn't exist for a type, then it defaults back to a table or a list, depending on the number of properties. And you could use that to your advantage. Right? Maybe you're creating custom objects, and you might, if you're teetering on the edge of 4 or 5 properties on that object, well, maybe if you're thinking about what it's going to look like, you would choose one or the other based on what you wanted to. So when should you override the default values? Like PowerShell comes built in with a bunch of defaults. If it doesn't have what you most commonly need to access on an object, remember you can always call format table or format list or any of the format operators and get what you want out of the object. But if you're doing that all the time, that just takes up a lot of time, and it kind of distracts you from the task at hand, right? If you're trying to dig into the event log and troubleshoot an issue, and every time you want to look at a bunch of event records, then you also have to format them. Then you have to think about, okay, what's that format expression, or what's the syntax there, and it kind of distracts you from what you're actually trying to do. And so it really just depends on how often you need to run stuff and what you need to access the most. When a type has more than 4 properties, and so by default it's being returned as a list, but if you have a whole bunch of those properties being returned, it's just scrolling off your screen, and maybe all of those items are really short values, and maybe they're all just numbers, but it's 5 numbers. per object. And so if it's better served as a table, then you might want to consider a default format. When you want some other formatting on a specific property or some human readability improvement, then you might also want to consider some sort of formatting. I don't have an example included about color coding. There's some other gotchas there that I didn't have time to fully go into, but if there's a lot of other options you might want to look into for custom formats for specific arrangements of things on the screen based on whatever it is you're doing. So those are some reasons when you would want to use it, but be careful. Anytime you're changing defaults, not just for format stuff, when your machine is different, you got to be careful about when you're sharing code with other people, because now you're writing code in an environment that has defaults that you kind of forget maybe are different than someone else's machine. You share that code out, now it's going to produce different results. It might, if you're lucky, throw an error, and if you're unlucky, it might just do the wrong thing and delete the wrong user or who knows what. I found specifically with the out file and out printer, so you can take a pipeline, you can pipe it to out file. The default formats are applied automatically in those two functions. And so based on what it is you're doing, you've got to be careful about how you're piping stuff into a file. And so if that's what your script is doing and somebody else runs it, it'll be in a different format than you might have expected. It's also good to test things out so you would know this before it goes into production, but still kind of some sharp edges to be careful for. For the unknown types, for those that would switch between the list or the table based on 4 or 5 properties, PowerShell doesn't really know, the engine doesn't know that much information about what properties are associated with the type, and so it just looks at the very first one that comes back and infers from that what it should be displaying. And I've got an example for that. So I've got 3 custom objects here, okay? They're in an array. One of them has a property called property1, prop1. A separate object has a single property called prop2, and another object has a single property called prop3. Okay, so there are 3 different objects. They have the same type because they're all the PS custom object type, but they have different actual definitions. Only the very first one is printed. So I've run into this before, and it's not fun to troubleshoot. I know I have 3 objects, but I'm only seeing one. If I pipe all of that to measure object to count how many are there, it shows me that there's 3. But because the first time that the default display, let me go back to this one, there's that magic happening at the end because I didn't say format list or format table or anything like that. It's going through that default evaluation, and so it's just picking, okay, show me the value of prop1 for every object. And only that first one has a prop1 property. Okay, I don't really know a good way around it except try to make sure that all your functions or whatever only return one type of object. So if anybody knows some tricks for dealing with these, I'm very interested, but that's definitely bitten me before. Okay, so how should I go about overriding the defaults? I would suggest try to think about the least invasive option to start with and work your way up as needed. Okay, you want to keep it easy enough to understand. If you really are allergic to XML, then I would say maybe you don't want to look into the format data and just do whatever you can and leave that aside, or maybe just do the really simple cases. But as you want to change the properties that are being displayed, or you're trying to figure out how to share it with other people, you are going to have to come back to the stuff. So maybe in the XML file you add in a comment about the article or wherever you took your default from, so you can go back and look at it later. I'd also say keeping things temporary is better than permanent. What I mean by that is you can set stuff in your profile script. So if you've never messed with that before, when PowerShell loads, there's a PowerShell script file that runs automatically based on where you launched the program from, and you can run a whole bunch of stuff by default there. You can have commands that run on your behalf every time you start up PowerShell. If you do this, then you're setting the default values every time you open it up, whether or not you need them, and it might become more likely that you forget they're even there, or forget that you've actually defined it that way, and that you're looking at something that's different than the way everyone else is. So it is good to set those defaults in the profile if you need stuff all the time. If you're dealing with Active Directory every day, maybe that's a good place to put some defaults in your profile. But if it's just once in a while, you might want to skip to one of these other options, and really try to mentally keep track of the fact that there is a trade-off in you having different defaults than other people. Maybe keep a little folder of scripts handy that have all these commands to update type data or update format data, and you've got your XML files in a directory, but they just don't load automatically every time the profile loads. But hey, today I'm going to be dealing with a lot of Active Directory stuff, or this hour, let me load up the defaults to help me with this task. When I close PowerShell session, those defaults go away, and now when I'm writing a script to share with somebody else tomorrow, it's not going to be dependent on those defaults. So that might be a good option for you. Another one might be that if you wanted to write a function to wrap some of the formatting operators. So I've got an example for this. This way you're not really dealing with defaults, but it's kind of a hybrid approach. So you don't have to change the defaults, but you could still avoid having to retype all of the complex formatting stuff over and over again. Give you a second to look at that. Okay, so what this is doing, I'm getting all of the files in a directory that match the name format. I'm sorting them by their full path name, and then I'm formatting it as a table. But I want to see the size of the file in human readable format. By default, this length property shows up, and it's just the number of bytes. And I'm not very good at knowing how many bytes are in a megabyte, and that's just annoying, right? And to see the size difference between kilobytes and megabytes and gigabytes and stuff, that's just, I don't know if anyone has terabyte size files, but I put that in there too. So I want to see it in human readable format, and then I want to see that next to the path, and that's really all I want to do. But here I've got a complex expression to do that in line in the format table function, and I always forget, okay, I know it needs a name, but is it name or label? I forget all that stuff. I forget how the syntax is for the expression, so I always have to Google it. Just for this, I added in that I could write align it, but I forgot that it was even an option to do. So maybe if you're a wizard, you've got this on lock, but there's no real autocomplete for this kind of stuff. So it's definitely tedious to get it formatted just the way you want. So I'd encourage you to, if you have to do this kind of stuff, or if it's useful, try to save this out as some sort of script that you can reuse that and not have to be bogged down by the minutia of this formatting every time. So here's what that output is like. We've just got the size column on the left. You can see that it's either showing you kilobytes, or one of the files has bytes, but if the files were gigabytes in size, it would show you just how many gigabytes there were. I just stuck with that format files in the PowerShell install directory, so there's not too many large files there. Okay, so I want to capture that format function and wrap it up. So I'm going to create a custom function. I'm going to call it format custom file. You can kind of call it whatever you want. It's your function. Okay, I've got one parameter. It's these file system info items. The way this is going to work, and I apologize, this part might be a little more than 101, but when the function first starts, it's going to create a list, and then for every item that gets sent into this format custom file, it's going to accumulate, it's going to add it to the list. Okay, so I've got all the items coming out of the get child item function, and they're all coming in here. And before they're processed, they're all put into this list, so that at the very end, I can take that all variable that's accumulated all these items, and then I wait until it has all the files there, and then I can just pipe them all to format table. Okay. So the downside of this is if you're dealing with a lot of files is that you have to accumulate them all and you can't just kind of stream it all the way through. But for most use cases, this kind of pattern works just fine. And here, now I've got that exact same code that I had before where I'm calling format table, but now I could reuse this function whenever I want, and all I have to do is do whatever filtering I want, and then just pipe it to format custom file, and I'll get the same output. So I could have different types of formats based on whatever it is I was doing that day, or whatever. If I've got 3 different common ways of looking at files or Active Directory users or whatever it is, then setting one default might not be the best option. So this would be kind of a compromise way to capture that code, but to still be able to switch in the moment, kind of pivot and figure out which format you actually want. Okay, so we reviewed all of those. Try to keep it to the least invasive option. Keep your stuff easy to understand. Temporary is better than permanent. Be mindful of sharing code with others and how your defaults might affect that. But don't be too afraid of changing the defaults, because they really can make you more productive. I mean, I have a whole bunch of defaults set, and I have accumulated them over time as I've done things repeatedly. I've heard of the 7-17-70 rule, where if you're doing something 1 to 7 times, just do it normally. But by the time you get up to 7, you should start building up a script where you can do it more repeatedly. You don't have to type it out every time. Between 7 and 17, that's kind of that range for starting to build up a little bit of tooling to make your life easier. And by the time you get to 70, it should be fully automated if you're doing it that much. So there's just this spectrum of improvement. And so with that, I'm done. Does anybody have any questions?
When you're working with outputting different colors, first of all, is that something that you've done?
Yes, and unfortunately, I did not put in an example of that, but I've done that with. I can talk about it for a second. The question was when you want to format stuff with colors, how does that work basically? The only way I found for that to work reliably on Windows is using WriteHost, which some PowerShell professionals say that WriteHost kills puppies, and so you should never use that. And so, except for when it doesn't, exactly. And so, there are times when you want to write something to the host. We saw that that slide with the pipeline, and you never want to write to the host when you really intended to be writing to the pipeline. And so that's why the command write output is much better for normal usage. But once you get to that tail end of the pipeline, where you're talking about formatting and screen display, that's when it could be appropriate to use the WriteHost function, and that allows you to color code things. In looking at event log records, I found it useful to color code that based on the severity. So red for errors, orange for warnings, and then format it in kind of a readable view with the message. The default format for event log records is just terrible in my opinion for actually trying to troubleshoot something. So I've changed that up. The only real downside, and I didn't actually discover it until I was prepping for this presentation, is that the out file and out printer functions use the default formatting. And so if you've set up a default format to use WriteHost and you pipe that to a file, you get nothing in the file, because that format is just saying, oh, this is redirected to the host. So it's kind of a sharp edge that I didn't have enough time to fully explain in slide form. But if your use case is, hey, I only use this on my screen and I know when I'm using it, it could be really useful. I mean, I think there could be all kinds of good use cases for WriteHost with color coding. If your scannability of the page is improved and it's something you're doing repeatedly, I highly recommend it, as long as you're also aware of when it's not appropriate to use that and when it would bite you. Yeah.
So you had the format custom file.
Mm-hmm.
that actually, I think the way you were doing that, it breaks the pipeline. If you wanted to preserve the pipeline, you could, instead of using the format list, you can use select object and create a custom, basic custom object out of what you're sending through the pipeline.
Yes. So if I understand you right, you said I had to break the pipeline because I was accumulating all the objects. I had to wait until the end tag, end method or whatever to send that out. If I use select object, I could avoid that. For that case, that's true, I think, or correct me if I'm wrong, if I had like 5 or 6 properties and I still wanted them to be a table, wouldn't select object then it would force it to be a list because there's like 5 or 6 properties on that object, or is there
right, so
formatting options in there?
You'll be outputting from that function a custom object itself that's
I see what you're saying. Yes.
Previous object. And then you can format, to a list or table, whatever you need.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, so my example had done all the object conversion and the formatting bound together, and thank you for pointing that out. Really, it would have been better and more reusable to do the formatting in a separate, the object conversion where you have like the length to size, the human readable size, do that separately, and then pipe that to format table instead of trying to bundle all of that together. That would make it much more reusable.
The format table and the format list, I mean, that's straight text. It's not,
yep.
it destroys the object.
Yep.
So if you have the thing that converts all of the parameters that you want, or the attributes that you want, customize those, then you can still preserve it in an object form. It may not be the same type.
Yeah.
But it's still.
Yeah, thanks. I will change that example as soon as this is over. Any other questions?
It's sort of related to that, but to your first example, and I know you were looking, I think, probably for the easiest place to point to where formatting would help. But in your first example, if you just need extra fields in the output, if it's under 5, you could just use select, right?
Yes.
I mean, all the other ones were clear, but that's a place where you need to make that decision whether it's worth the time to format or the overhead, or if you just want to select.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. There are a whole myriad of ways to change things, and another way might be to, if I need, you could add a member to an object. So like that conversion stuff, I could use it with add member, and now I've got this member on the original object the same way. I could just select out the properties. The object type name actually changes when you use select object. I don't know if you've piped something out of select object into get member, it's selected dot and then the actual type name. So PowerShell no longer recognizes that original formatting, but that might be appropriate at that time. Yeah, that's certainly a good point. Well, you got a few extra minutes. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your time, and hopefully this was a little bit educational for you.